though I will say this review probably made zero to no sense. Welcome back to my channel, and today I'm bringing you the August recap for the Monochromatic Year Project Pan Book Edition. Quick reminder, this project was created by KaliFab, who I'll have linked down below, as well as everyone else who has joined in on this project. Now, it was originally a makeup project, a makeup panning project, where the concept was that you panned products that matched the colour of the month. Now, I can't do things like normal, so I decided to change it up a bit, and I'm doing that using books. So each month I read books that match in some way, shape or form the colour of that month. So before we get into it, I would like to announce that I have reached my Goodreads goal of reading 24 books. If you remember a while back, I originally had my goal set for 12, which I hit within the first few months of the year. So I upped that by doubling it and to 24, and now I have officially reached 24 books. So that is actually more books in this year than I have read combined in the last 2. So I am very, very proud of myself, and I am actually loving this project. I think that the restrictions of the colour is a lot more easy flowing than other restrictions. Like, so last year I did it using A to Z, so I did your books A to Z project, and I think I got through 11 books. And the year before that, I did the Sugar Pop Challenge, which has a direct theme for each month. Where at least with colour, you can make it can be in the title, it could be in the last name, it could literally be a tiny little speck on the cover, the tiniest of little specks on the cover. And boom, you've reached your colour. So I have found that this has been a lot easier, and I'm tending to, instead of fighting hard to find a book that matches the theme and not really being too into it, I am finding books easier that match my theme, which means that I'm kind of reading books I want to read, if that makes any sense. But that's where we're going. Now, at this point, I was going to originally up my goal again, but a couple people said I shouldn't, and I should just celebrate every book afterwards. But I think I will officially do that, so I'm not going to up my goal in my Goodreads account anymore, but I am going to have an unofficial goal of doubling it again. So I would like to read another 12 books since reaching my goal of 24. Let's see how we go. But I'm not going to put a lot of stress on myself regards to that. Between now and December, which is 4 months, so that's September, October, November, December, I would have to read 3 books a month to reach the goal. So I'm not going to put heaps of pressure on myself, because as you have seen over the last few months, some months I get through lots of books, some months I don't get through very many. And it also depends on what books I'm reading. If I'm reading smaller, quick, easy reading books, I can get through them, or graphic novels, where if I'm reading a larger novel, it takes me a lot longer to get through it. So we will see how we go. Plus, on top of that, there are books that I am reading that are not going towards this project. For example, last month I read a book for my book blub, and this, which if you've got any interest in that, make sure to check out last month's video, and I'll have that linked up here. Alright, so there is my information blurt. There you go, you can have that. And now we will start talking about the books I actually did manage to read. So first off, I read a book called A Faraway Smell of Lemons, and this was by Rachel Joyce. It was a very small book. It was about 50 pages, maybe slightly more than that. So it was definitely what I would consider a short story, or a novella, is that what they call it? I think that's what they call it. So it was a short story, but it was very good. I quite enjoyed it. I would definitely say that this book is what I would consider a slice of life. So you start off coming into this character, and you have no idea about her past, about her future. You don't have any idea about her at all, and it's literally like, bang, you've run into her on the street. And then you kind of follow her and get this basic idea of how she's feeling, what's going on. She does give you a tiny bit of backstory, but even then, the backstory itself is kind of, why? How did that even happen? How did you even get together? What? So without giving too many spoilers away, but obviously it's a small book, I'm going to tell you what happened. There are some spoilers. She goes into a cleaning shop by accident to hide from somebody who you've seen on the street. You've never done that before, ducked behind a building, ran into the closest shop so you don't have to talk to that person. That's what she did. And she ends up in this cleaning shop that smells like lemons, and this idea of lemons kind of half pulls on these memories from her past, but you don't know what they are at first. She doesn't just start blurting out these memories. It just kind of pulls on them. And she doesn't understand this concept of cleaning. Like, she's a bit of a hoarder, a bit of a, what happens type person. And we're in the Christmas season, but because of things that have been happening in her life, she hasn't done anything for Christmas. Christmas is within a day, I think, or so. And she hasn't done anything for Christmas. She's got a couple children and she hasn't even got them presents because what's happened recently has pulled her down. Now, some people who are reading this book, they might feel that what happened to her isn't that bad, but it's all, it all depends. It's on an individual basis. It all depends on who you are within the story. So she meets the girl in the shop who kind of is a bit like, what's this crazy lady doing in my store? Like, crying and whatever. But then they kind of have these weird conversations which feel a lot like they're talking about one thing, but really they're talking about something else. And slowly you get a bit more information about what's going on and what's happening. And then you get information about the shopkeeper and what's happening there. But really, this whole story ends with this slight bit of hope, this, this faraway idea that everything's going to be okay. But also this sadness, this, this sting of grief. And this idea that you don't know what's going to happen next. You don't. The book ends there and you never know what's to come or what really has been. All you know is the past, probably what would have equaled out to be maybe half an hour, maybe slightly more of this lady's life. And it was a very enjoyable book to read. It was very quick. I read it within maybe an hour, maybe a little bit more, but it really gave you this kind of captured idea of what could or couldn't be. So moving along, I kind of jumped from this slice of life story to full-on romance, basically. I actually read the second book in the Fake Boyfriend series, which is called Trick Play, and this is by Eden Finley. Now, if you remember correctly, I read the first book, which is called Fake Out, back in March. And I was kind of on the fence. I liked certain aspects of that book, and there was other aspects that I felt really lost it. And I wasn't 100% sure of if I was going to read the second one in the series. Let's just say I'm really happy I did. The second book was what I would consider better than the first. I enjoyed the characters more, surprisingly, especially considering I didn't think I would, because you met these characters in the first book, and they were kind of, there was Matt and Noah, and they didn't really grab me in the first book. I was kind of a bit like, come on. But in the second book, you got a lot deeper into how they were feeling, what was going on, their thoughts, why they did the way they did things. And the fake boyfriend trope worked so much better than I felt it did in the first book. I do think that maybe it was made better because there was already that first book which I had read. So there was already certain aspects and certain characters that I had a knowledge of and an understanding. But the second book was just very much a better interpretation of the trope, in my opinion. The trope idea of fake boyfriends worked better, I think, because it wasn't just for that tiny little slice of life. So with the fake boyfriend first book, so Fake Out, they only did it for a weekend, which consisted of probably about this, this much of the story. Stories this much of it was this fake boyfriend trope, to a point of actually really having to be fake boyfriends, because the next section worked in that they were sleeping together and they were kind of friends with benefiting, and that was, they weren't having to be fake boyfriends anymore. And then it was the development of love from there, which was a bit, considering the book was called, Fake Boyfriends, I thought there would be more of that trope. But in the second book, in Trick Play, Matt and Noah, they take on this idea of being fake boyfriends because they are trying to fix Matt's reputation. So Matt, who was in the first book, he had he's a NRL player, plays football of some kind. I am not sporty, so all of these stories are based around a sport in some kind, and I am the least sport knowledge person ever. But he played some kind of football, not Australian football, so it's not AFL, so I don't really understand it. So they played football, and he got caught out in a very compromised position, with literally his pants around his ankles. So then they're trying to build his reputation back to being something good. And by doing that, they've decided that they want to make him a family man. They want to, give him a long-term, sweet love romance with someone who has good standings. So they go with Noah, who is the resident rich boy in the stories. And the story travels from there. So it starts off with them kind of not liking each other, as normal. And then they're pretending to be boyfriends. And then they kind of realize that they're actually quite attracted to each other. But they want to keep it all very we don't deal with relationships around here. So they're all friends with benefiting, because as you do. And then it builds from there. And the building and the pace and the realizations, for me, I felt was a lot more realistic than what happened in Fake Out. So I definitely really enjoyed this book, and I am heavily considering reading the next one. There is also a 2.5, so it's a slight spin-off that doesn't follow the fake boyfriend trope, but follows some characters from that series, where you go with Aaron, who, if you read the book, if you read Trick Play, has a relationship with Noah that kind of went bad, and that kind of story also plays a lot on what Noah does and what Noah doesn't do. So basically, if you are interested in the fake boyfriend trope and in gay romance, I would definitely recommend giving this series a look. And last but not least, for the month of August, I read a book that has nothing at all to do with either of the first ones I mentioned. So I read The Heart of the Grass Tree by Molly Myrne. Now, this is an Australian author. She's an Australian author, and this is actually set mainly in Kangaroo Island, which is within my state of South Australia, and they talk about Kangaroo Island, and they also talk a bit about Adelaide. So for me, the sections where they were talking about Adelaide especially, and how the character goes to Glenelg and then gets on a tram and goes to the city to go to the Adelaide Museum and the Adelaide Art Gallery, I know where all of that is located and how you have to do that trip. So for me, it was a lot more personal. I felt a lot more connected to this story. But that's not the main concept of the story. This story follows 3 distinct storylines, essentially, which are all connected in a very, sometimes quite strange way. So the main story that you start off with is Nell. So Nell is an elderly lady. She's lived in Kangaroo Island for a very long time, and she's wanting to write her story. She's wanting to tell the story from within her heart. So she is releasing it onto the page. Then you jump back in time until the 1800s, and you are following William, and I have a lot of trouble saying her name, so let me just read it, and I'm going to butcher it, and I'm going to feel very bad about butchering it, but let's see if I can say it. Marigani? I am very sorry. I think it's Marigani. So you follow William and Marigani, and that is definitely said incorrectly. I'm trying to say it how it's spelt, which is probably not how it's actually said. But so William is the son of a sealer, which they did come to Kangaroo Island back in the 1800s, who were generally white men who weren't kind of wanting to fit with the colonialization of the country. They were a bit wild men who lived on the island and hunted seals. They did do some very terrible things, including steal local indigenous Aboriginal women to be their wives. So this story touches on that. So it starts off where you're dealing with his dad stole his wife, Imu, and her child by accident, because the child would not stay. So he ended up with the child, who is Marigani. Oh, I wish I could say it. So they ended up with her as well. And William is a bit younger. We don't really find out how old they are, but we get the impression that they're kind of young. They're probably either little, or she's quite little, and he's maybe in his early teens, and then you grow up with them. So I don't really know how long the story is actually based over time in regards to the 1800s, but if you do look, there are dates along the tops of some of these sections. Let me see if I can find one for you. Like here, 1822, Encounter Bay, South Australia. So they do give you a bit of information. So if you do pay a lot of attention to the dates, you can kind of figure how many years they go over. So you follow that story. Then there is a third train of story that you're following. That is Pearl and her sister Lucy and her mother Diana, who Diana is Nell's daughter. And Nell has unfortunately passed away. So you are following their story and them dealing with their grief of their loss, finding themselves and understanding how all these stories merge together. Pearl is considered the main character because on the back of the book it says when Pearl's grandmother dies. So Pearl, I think, is meant to be the main character, the main protagonist. I did not like her as a character. I loved this book. This book was fantastic, but I did not like Pearl. I found her to be a little bit like her grief overshadowed everybody else's, and she has issues with her mother anyway. That's said within the book, that her and her mother have issues, but Diana and her mother Nell also had issues, and that tale plays out again the next level down. So you're dealing with Diana trying to understand her mother and grieve her mother, though she had a troubled relationship with her. But then you're also dealing with Pearl, who was mainly raised by her grandmother. You're dealing with that aspect as well, because then Pearl almost thinks that she has more of a right to the grief and to Nell's things and to everything that's happening than neither Diana, who's Nell's daughter, or Lucy, who is Pearl's sister, so Nell's other granddaughter, who was not raised by Nell. And at times you get lost in this idea and you become a bit like, come on, Pearl, calm your farm, mate. But I guess that's the concept of the story. It deals heavily with finding your heart, finding your inner story and telling it. So that, yes, there is a lot going on within this book. That is, it very much is. That's, you know, there is a lot going on. But you get to deal with this crazy family stories from different generations, and they are all so unique but so similar. So if you are looking to read a Australian book, especially one that's set within South Australia, that touches both on our history, also our present and our early history, but also our most recent history plus present, I would definitely recommend giving this story a try, because it deals with this. So you do hear a lot about the sealers and the Aboriginal women who they stole, really, from their homes and made their wives. So you deal a lot with that story, but then you move from that and you deal with this story of how love did bloom from something that wasn't nice. So you then go into the story with William and Mari, and you deal with that concept as well, that though the original beginnings of that story is rather horrible, you then come into this true love story that come about in that time. You then move to, I think it's the 50s, where Nell is young and she falls in love with the boy next door, who you find out quite quickly is of Aboriginal descent, and he is Aboriginal. So then you deal with that aspect. You deal with this story that she is white and she's in love with this boy, but her family are not okay with that. It's okay to be friends. That's one of the big stories, is they're supposedly families of friends. They're family friends of each other, but that's fine until it's dealing with them marking their name, essentially. So you deal with that story and the horrible scenario that follows, that leaves Nell what I would consider permanently damaged. And I think that I understand family secrets, because this deals with a lot with family secrets. But sometimes I think if the secrets were just said at a better time, things wouldn't be as bad as they were. I wonder if she had told Diana the truth about why things were the way they were when she was young, maybe their relationship would have been better. You know, if Diana knew and had told Pearl certain things about her life, maybe her relationship with Pearl would have been better. But that, I guess, is the concept of the story. It's what happens when someone's gone, and is it too late? Is it too late to, you know, reconcile the heart, to release the pain that was there? So now moving on to September, and September's colour is purple and plum. So what is there to say about September? I think that looking at where I'm currently sitting and what I'm currently reading, I'm hoping that I can get through at least 3, possibly 4, but most likely only 3 books in September. One of those I have already started reading, and that is a graphic novel. So I think if it's those kind of scenarios, which they're a bit easier and quicker to read, I might be able to get more than less done. Well, that's everything that we've got for today. So I'm Verity. That was the August recap for the Monochromatic Project Pan book edition. And now to the outro.